A racist cop slams a 62-year-old woman against a brick wall for existing with dignity. No gunshots, no chase, no warning. Just a woman, one hand clutching a Bible, the other cradling a bouquet of white lilies, walking home after Sunday service. And then she's shoved hard against a brick wall, her neck pinned by the officer's elbow because she looked like someone, because she was walking alone, because her skin was brown. In a quiet American street, in broad daylight, in front of strangers. Dignity was crushed, no reason required. But there's one thing that officer didn't know. The woman he just assaulted wasn't just someone. She was Naomi Ellison, wife of a federal judge. And in 5 seconds of silence, the balance of power began to shift. Her silence became the center of attention. His badge became a burden, and the entire city started to watch. This isn't just a story about mistaken identity. This is an indictment of a system, a battle cry for dignity, without yelling, without fists, just the strength to stay standing. Because some voices, even when quiet, can shake the entire machine. The bells of St. Mark's Church had just faded. Their final echoes lingered in the spring sky, like a familiar blessing drifting overhead. Naomi Ellison descended the wide stone steps, her low heels tapping softly against concrete, worn smooth by time. In her right arm, she held a bouquet of white lilies, tied with a pale blue ribbon. In her left hand, a weathered leather-bound Bible, the edges frayed from years of use. Each step she took seemed to hold something: memory, faith, and the quiet steadiness built over a lifetime. She wore a deep navy crepe dress, a silver dove pin fastened at her collar. Her silver hair was neatly tucked into a low bun, perfectly in place, not a strand astray. Nothing about her demanded attention. Nothing was extravagant. But anyone passing by would pause, if only for a moment, because she wasn't just walking. She was present. That day was her wedding anniversary. Like every year, she attended service alone, sat in the third pew, lit a single candle, then walked home to make dinner for two. Though her husband, Jeremiah, now served as a federal judge, always traveling, in meetings, she kept the ritual, not out of habit, but out of roots, for the things that must not be allowed to fade. And as always, she began her 2-block walk, through a neighborhood where history still felt close enough to touch. Naomi had just passed through the familiar wrought iron gate, the hem of her dress catching slightly in the breeze. She paused, adjusting the fabric with quiet grace, a small ritual of composure. On both sides of the street, white magnolias were in bloom. Their scent was soft, yet piercing, as if something old, something buried, was waiting quietly to rise again. And then she felt it. No sirens, no engine hum, just a lone police cruiser, parked diagonally across the street, positioned to see the entire corner. Still, but full of intent. Naomi didn't look directly. She didn't need to. She could feel it, that familiar gaze sweeping over each of her steps. No greeting, no noise. It clung to her shoulders like damp air, like the quiet vigilance learned from decades of living in this skin. A stare, deliberately unhidden, from the driver's window. White male, buzz cut, no phone, no sunglasses, just one elbow propped on the car door, and eyes too calm to be harmless. Naomi's grip on the bouquet tightened. In her mind, a checklist began. Phone charged, wallet still in place, church gate locked, not out of fear, but from the quiet instinct of always being prepared, even when no one warns you. She whispered, almost to herself, "Not today." The sound of the car door opening, a dry mechanical clunk, rang out like an uninvited signal. Naomi didn't turn around, but she heard the footsteps, heavy, intentional, not rushed, but clearly meant to be noticed. Ma'am, a man's voice, low-pitched, trying to sound polite, but something about it was stiff, cold, off-kilter underneath. Naomi turned. Her face held no fear, no smile, only a calmness forged through years of knowing how the world works. Yes, officer? He stepped closer, one hand resting loosely on the flashlight at his hip, the other hovering near his belt. His eyes scanned the bouquet, the Bible, then landed on the silver dove pin at her collar. Where are you headed? Home, Naomi replied, just down the block. Where are you coming from? Church, St. Mark's. A pause. Is something wrong? He squinted. You live around here? Naomi met his eyes. Her voice didn't rise, but it landed clear. I've lived on this street longer than you've worn that badge. No threat, no accusation, just truth. Plain as a birth date on paper. But something in him shifted. A tightening of the shoulders, a pressed lip, a glare that no longer tried to hide its irritation. She knew. This wasn't about ID anymore. This was about one thing. The officer took half a step back. Would she bow her head? But not to give her space, just to reposition, to get into character for the next act. I need to see your ID. His voice was flat, like he was reading it straight from a procedure manual. Naomi didn't move. Her expression didn't shift. Officer, have I done something wrong? He glanced at the bouquet, then at the Bible, as if debating whether to classify them as potential weapons. We received a report, he said slowly, that a woman matching your description was seen prowling around a few homes nearby. Each word dropped like a hook, fishing for something to stick. Naomi didn't blink. I just came from church. I live on Hawthorne Street. I'm walking home. Maybe so, but I still need to verify. She nodded gently, not in agreement, just to acknowledge she'd heard him. Then she asked, in a voice soft, but sharper than any blade, and do you check the ID of every woman holding a Bible and white lilies at noon on a Sunday? A breeze drifted through. The hem of her dress stirred. A silver strand of hair slipped across her cheek. Naomi raised her hand, calmly tucking it back behind her ear, eyes still locked on his. In that moment, she wasn't just a wife or a teacher. She was a conscience calling out a system with nothing but reason and dignity. The officer's jaw clenched, his lips tightened, and the look in his eyes shifted from guarded to hostile. Naomi didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She simply nodded. Then do what you feel you must, but just know, I know exactly who I am. Just one sentence, 10 words, and it was enough to strip the mask off every ounce of power disguised as law. No signal, no warning. He lunged. One hand seized her arm, fingers digging mercilessly into her skin. The bouquet hit the pavement, white lily petals crushed beneath his boot. His other arm wrapped around her neck, driving her backward into the brick wall of a shuttered bookstore. Her back struck first, then her shoulder, then the base of her neck. The crepe fabric tore against the jagged edge of the red wall. The Bible flew from her bag, landing face down, spine cracked open to a psalm, one that spoke of enemies falling into the very trap they'd set. Naomi didn't fight. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply raised one hand to his elbow, not to push back, but to keep her balance. Her eyes looked up through the late morning light, straight into the face of the man who had tried to crush her. And with a single breath, she whispered, I'm still standing. It wasn't resistance through force. It was a final declaration of dignity, the kind no one can take. The sound came like a blade slicing through the air. Tires screeched, sharp, sudden, as if someone had slammed the brakes on the city's conscience. A black SUV tore into view, urgent but controlled. Its wheels ground against the curb, the engine cut with chilling precision. Jeremiah Ellison stepped out. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He didn't look like a man who had just witnessed his wife being pinned to a wall. He walked, slowly, each step heavy, like a gavel dropping in a courtroom. His gray suit hung open, collar slightly loose. Sunlight caught the wedding ring on his hand. But it wasn't his clothes that made the crowd pull back. It was presence. The kind of presence that doesn't silence a room. It stops time. Naomi was still pinned to the wall. Her eyes met his. No words were needed. The officer, still unaware that his authority had already been stripped away with a single look. Jeremiah stopped. His voice was low, even, but enough to silence the entire street. "Get your hands off my wife." Phones lit up. Cameras rose. Someone whispered, like a line from scripture, "That's a federal judge. He's done for." And just like that, the badge once worn like armor became evidence. The officer, Doyle, froze in the middle of the street. His hand dropped from Naomi's shoulder, but not out of regret, only because he had just heard the name. Ellison. His eyes darted, from the man standing in front of him, to the nameplate on his own chest, as if trying to confirm the reality that had just flipped upside down. Naomi stepped away from the wall. Her back ached, her shoulder burned, but her posture had never stood taller. No one helped her up, because she had never fallen. There was only her gaze, calm, unyielding, the look of someone who had stared straight into violence and never blinked. Jeremiah didn't rush. He stepped forward once more, just enough to make the distance between justice and abuse unmistakable. His voice was low, but it carried more weight than any siren Doyle had ever blown. "You assaulted the wrong woman." No sirens, no handcuffs, just a silence, like the gavel had already dropped, and Doyle, who once believed he was in control of the situation, now stood in the middle of the street, like a man awaiting judgment. A woman's voice rose from the edge of the sidewalk. "What's going on here?" Stepped forward. The crowd. A black woman, middle-aged, sharp-eyed, her uniform crisp, her badge catching the sunlight. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her mere presence shifted the entire atmosphere. Her eyes scanned the scene. Naomi, faint bruising at her neck. Jeremiah, standing between them like a shield. Doyle, flushed, sweating, his hands twitching near his belt. Jeremiah tilted his head slightly, spoke slowly, deliberately. "This officer shoved my wife against a wall, put his arm around her neck. No cause, no warning. That's abuse of power. Broad daylight, in full view of the community." The female officer turned to Doyle. No yelling, just a question. Clear and surgical. "Did you personally see her commit a crime? Was there a clear threat? Or just a feeling?" Doyle stammered. She matched the description of a suspicious. But right then, Naomi spoke. Her voice was soft, barely more than a breath, but it carried louder than every live stream mic in the crowd. "He didn't see me. He saw the story he wanted to believe." A ripple moved through the bystanders. Phones lifted higher. Her name, Naomi Ellison, began trending in real time. Justice had just gone live. There wasn't a single empty seat in the courtroom that day. Reporters packed the aisles. Civilians lined the hallway. Students, pastors, Naomi's former pupils, all showed up. A large screen was pulled down. The footage from that day began to play. No narration, no dramatic music, just the sound of wind, the low murmur of onlookers, and the image of Naomi being shoved against a wall. The bouquet falling, the Bible hitting the ground. Her voice, quiet but steady. "I'm standing." No one spoke. No one needed to. The truth was testifying for itself. Witnesses began to rise. Not just from the crowd that day, but from inside the department. A young officer, his voice shaky but firm, said, "I've seen Officer Doyle cross the line before, but we were encouraged to handle it internally." Doyle sat rigid, his suit no longer hiding his unraveling. Lips pressed tight, forearms locked, but nothing could hold back the weight of truth, now crashing down like the strike of a gavel. Naomi took the stand. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't deliver a speech. She spoke like a teacher, the kind who once taught children how to use words to describe reality. "I wasn't assaulted because of what I did. I was assaulted because of what they saw when they looked at me." The room went still. Not from the absence of voices, but from the presence of too much truth. The judge entered. 3 strikes of the gavel. No one spoke. No one moved. The verdict was read. Slowly, one charge at a time. Violation of protocol. Unjustified use of force. Infringement of civil rights. Doyle's name appeared in every count, each word landing like a stone, filling the very pit he had dug for himself. There was no applause, no cheering, only silence, heavy, layered, as if the entire courtroom had just exhaled at once. Naomi sat still, no tears, no smile, just a slight tilt of her head, eyes closed for a second, as if setting down a weight she had carried for 40 years. Doyle sat frozen, hands clenched, jaw locked. No more commands, no more excuses, just an oversized suit and a name now etched into the court record, like a warning to the very system he once claimed to serve. Outside, sunlight angled past the stone columns of the courthouse. Naomi's shadow stretched across the steps, not towering, but unshakable, because her victory didn't come with noise. It came with truth, finally acknowledged. 1 month after the trial, a new nameplate was mounted on the glass door of City Hall's 3rd floor. Community Oversight Council on Police Conduct. Chair, Naomi Ellison. No lofty title, no power bestowed by others. Naomi took her seat at the round table, a place once filled with people who talked about the community, but had never stood in it. She listened. She asked questions that cut deeper than any prepared agenda. She handwrote every proposal, every policy revision, every training model designed to teach officers how to see a person before they see a record. Meanwhile, Jeremiah led an unprecedented review, a reinvestigation of every misconduct complaint over the past 15 years. No more backroom meetings behind closed doors. Body cams, mandatory. New training blocks, focused on nonviolent response. Civilian reports, published quarterly, step by step, quiet but relentless. Naomi didn't overhaul the entire system in a day, but she laid the first brick with the same hand that had once been bruised, now signing a new policy in bold blue ink. And this time, no one dared look away. A high school courtyard, strung with soft yellow lights, folding chairs lined in rows. The first community meeting after the reforms wasn't held in a municipal hall, but here, in the very place where children once learned how to walk, to speak, stood on a plain wooden stage. Behind her, a green chalkboard still smudged with yesterday's lessons. In her hands, a soft-covered notebook, the same one she began writing in the night she was shoved against a wall. She read aloud the list of changes that had been made, not as a victory speech, but like someone retracing each step of a journey that could never be undone. Then she looked up, sweeping the room with her eyes. Her voice was slow, low, pressed with weight, like a knock on the door of someone's conscience. "I have just one question. What do you want your child to feel when they step out onto the street?" Silence. Then, a woman rose from the back, wearing a light shawl, fingers gripping the strap of her canvas bag. Her voice shook, but it was clear. I want them to feel safe. Naomi nodded, looking deep into her eyes. Then don't let that just be a feeling. Make it the law. No applause, only eyes, shifting from fear to responsibility. Late afternoon. Hawthorne Street bathed in soft sunlight. Tree shadows stretched long across the golden pavement. Naomi walked slowly past the old brick wall, the same wall that once held her silence, that once bore witness to a battle fought without fists. And right there, at the very spot, a fresh bouquet of white lilies, wrapped in brown paper, tied with a pale blue ribbon, just like the one she dropped that day. She didn't bend down, didn't pick it up. She simply reached out and touched the rough surface of the wall, like tracing a scar that had healed but would never be forgotten. No words were spoken, just a small gesture, but it echoed louder than any press conference. Naomi walked on, shoulders steady, her pace calm, not because everything was fixed, but because she no longer walked alone. Across the street, a boy on a bike slowed down to watch. An elderly woman held her grandchild's hand. A young man live-streamed quietly as Naomi moved forward. No one rushed her. No one asked questions. They just watched, as if looking at a fixed point of truth. This reckoning now belongs to everyone. This cleansing, this awakening, was no longer hers alone. It belonged to an entire city, just beginning to relearn how to stand upright. Naomi never had to shout to be heard. She didn't bang tables. She didn't grab microphones. She didn't wave flags. She reclaimed justice simply by not stepping back, by holding her gaze, by staying on her feet, even when pinned against a wall of brick. Jeremiah, husband, judge, didn't seek revenge either. He didn't wield his title like a weapon. He didn't set the streets on fire with anger. He just stood there, and with one sentence, redrew the line between power and principle. This story, though it began on a quiet street, became a mirror. And if we dare to look into it, we may see ourselves, in the silence that once swallowed our words, in the glance we turned away, in the belief that if we're good enough, we won't be touched. But Naomi showed us. Dignity is not a reward. It is a right, not defined by the color of our skin, the way we walk, or the flowers we carry in our hands. Dignity is not a privilege. It's a posture, a memory, a promise we owe each other. And from that day on, the city never walked the same again. It walked slower, to see more clearly, and bowed its head, not out of fear, but out of respect.